Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, Bill Cannon. I'm a retired 27-year veteran of the NYPD. I retired as a sergeant, Manhattan North Homicide Squad. And with me tonight and on most nights, my co-host, retired NYPD detective and straight out of Brooklyn, Phil Grimaldi. How you doing tonight, Phil?
I'm pretty good, Billy, and I'm excited to talk with Michelle. We're going to have a little rap session here.
I tell you the truth, man. Our former producer, what's his name? Andrew Steiner. I can't think of his first name anymore because I know so many Steiners. Andrew Steiner hooked me up with Michele McPhee as a guest. I said, oh, my God, we'd love to have her on. And Andrew was our original producer when we were shooting it in my living room, and then we've come along 300-something episodes since then. But anyway, Michelle, tell the audience a little about you, if you don't mind. And you know what I'll do? I'll put one of your photos on the screen so they can see you in your working clothes there. There you are. Michele McPhee is a screenwriter and best-selling true crime author, 5-time Emmy-nominated television investigative producer in Boston for ABC News, award-winning columnist, contributing editor to Newsweek, and writer for Boston and LA magazines. She wrote episode 5 of Showtime's City on a Hill in season 1 and continues to consult for season 2 while writing her first HBO pilot, The Beast, based on a reporting contained in an upcoming book about the MS-13 street gang. McPhee spent more than 6 years investigating the Boston Marathon attacks, and that work is contained in her new book, Maximum Harm, the Tsarnaev brothers, the FBI, and the road to the marathon bombing. My God, that sounds like a pretty damn good resume.
Wow,
Michelle.
What a resume.
And you were here as a... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I think my favorite part of my resume is working at 1PP with all of you guys.
Right, I was just going to say that. And for 10 years, you were the Daily News crime writer, right, for the NYPD. And you actually took up residence in One Police Plaza, right?
They tried to kick me out, but I was in the shack on the second floor for years.
That's great.
Holding on for dear life.
I held on. There was plenty of it was fun working at the shack because, Phil, being from Brooklyn, I know you probably know Larry Salona, my nemesis from the Post, and there was some verbal exchanges and shoving matches. It was definitely a fun place to work in the shack because all of the competition back when you had reporters that actually did work and went out to crime scenes converged in the same little tiny, mouse infested office. You couldn't leave your bag on the floor at 1PP because you take home mice.
Yeah. Larry Salona, I appeared in a couple episodes. That's actually how I met Bill, The Perfect Murder. Did you know Rick Torelli?
I know Ricky very well. We were just talking about it. The only reason I got my DEA card is because I was not somebody who was bashing the cops on social media.
Okay. Yeah, well, Rick had me on the show, and I was on 3 episodes. Bill was on about 5 or 6 episodes. But Larry Salona and I appeared on the same episode. I played a detective, and he did some narration regarding the case that we were profiling. So, yeah, familiar name.
It's a great show. Very
Absolutely.
great show.
Thank you. Yeah.
Michelle, I want to get to some of the things that we've been covering. And one of them, and we love to have your perspective as a writer, because a lot of these things, and also as an investigative reporter, but we have that case from down south, the Murdaugh case, which is just, you can't make it up. You know about that case, right?
Are you kidding me? That is a bananas. If I wrote that as a screenplay, this is why I'm out in Hollywood, is trying to sell some of our real stories to Hollywood. If I wrote that, no one would buy it because it sounds so far-fetched.
No, I'm sorry. I had a little technical difficulty there. I wanted to bring up a video of there's about 5 or 6 different incidents in the Murdaugh case which fit the narrative. You can't believe this. You know what I mean? And one of them, of course, is his wife and his son being murdered. A double shooting that happened on June 7th. And before that, in 2018, his son Paul was operating a boat intoxicated, and a 19-year-old girl was killed during that. And he was set to stand trial for that. But before the trial happened, him and his mother were both murdered on the Murdaugh family property, a hunting lodge. And in 2015, a male named Stephen Smith who had some kind of relationship with one of the Murdaugh sons, allegedly a gay relationship. He was found dead in the middle of a road a few miles from their hunting lodge, and alleged it was from a hit and run accident. But there was no sign of a hit and run. It was blunt trauma. And then, of course, we have Alec Murdaugh setting up the shooting of himself. And it turned out it was his cousin that allegedly shot him. Right. We don't know if we believe that.
I ain't buying that one.
And now the other thing, which I was going to show you now, is his maid died in 2018 in a slip and fall in his house. And there was a $4.3 million lawsuit.
If you're counting, that's 5 bodies so far.
Right.
Five.
There was a $4.3 million lawsuit, of which it turns out that it seems Alec had embezzled the money and hired an attorney to represent the family of Gloria Satterfield that was from his law firm or one of his friends. So it seems like they were both involved in this. I'm just going to play a little bit of this, and we'll get the view of what happened.
Welcome back. The sons of Alex Murdaugh's former housekeeper are asking a judge to arrest him until they're paid the settlement in their mother's death. In an exclusive interview with Gloria Satterfield's son's attorney, Eric Bland told me he initially uncovered a $505,000 settlement. Then after filing a lawsuit, he uncovered a settlement that totaled millions. Bland said his clients have not seen a dime. Her sons are now suing, claiming that Murdaugh has yet to pay out the $4 million settlement. Multiple lawsuits claim Alex Murdaugh told the boys at Gloria's funeral that her fall was his fault and offered to help with legal claims. Murdaugh connected them with an attorney who they later learned was Alex's close friend.
The only people that have made money in this case are Corey Fleming and his law firm, Alex Murdaugh, who falsely set up an account named Forge to mirror a settlement structure company out of Atlanta, Georgia called Forge Consulting. That's a company that all of us plaintiff lawyers, when we're going to do structured settlements for minors or people who have long-term medical issues, get their money out over time.
You'll hear more of my exclusive interview with the Satterfield's attorney coming up on the 5 o'clock news.
Wow.
What do you think about that, Michelle?
I mean, it's insane. This just makes it reeks of like small town, shenanigans. I don't even know how the family didn't realize that the lawyer was friends with this dirty lawyer. The whole thing is crazy, right down to the fact, and I listened to you guys, of course, yesterday and talking about this case, and the idea that the highway patrol was put in charge of the homicide investigation for that dead kid at the side of the road was lunacy, wasn't it? And if you read some of the reports, the highway patrol was complaining that the DA was, trying to shuffle blame onto them instead of it was just the whole case from start to finish is insane, starting with the obvious death at this 19-year-old girl. Didn't he try to blame his best friend for that too?
Yeah, he was trying to say
miniseries.
Right, he was trying to say that his friend was driving the boat when it happened.
Yeah, his attorneys were pointing the finger at the friend instead of Paul being at the wheel of the boat at the time of the impact, which obviously caused the death of Mallory. But with the Stephen Smith case, when the highway patrol responded, they said this is clearly not a highway accident, a motor vehicle accident, or a pedestrian struck by a motor vehicle. They notified the homicide squad. However, the next day when the body was removed to the morgue, they did an autopsy, and the coroner that did the autopsy ruled it as a motor vehicle accident that claimed that the injury was caused by the mirror of a truck, I guess, because of the height of the injury in his head. There was some other factors. He was walking along the highway. His car had run out of gas. So they pieced together a scenario that put it in the camp of a motor vehicle accident, took the criminality out of it. Well, the criminality regarding a homicide anyway, but they try to make it look like it's obvious some type of a pedestrian struck by a motor vehicle. But then when the double murder happened in June, there was evidence recovered somehow, somewhere intertwined in that double murder, which was the murder of Alex's wife and his son Paul, that led them to reopen that investigation in 2015. That 2015 alleged hit and run investigation now is being carried as I guess it's investigator homicide.
Michelle,
Like the alleged Step and Fall, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
Michelle, I'd like you just to shed a little light on how an investigative reporter could uncover a case like this where there's obvious improprieties going on with this law firm that's basically controlled this area of South Carolina for over 100 years.
Well, it goes back to the very original adage, follow the money, which is true in every single solitary case I have ever written about, whether it's the Boston Marathon bombing or the Craigslist killer. It's always about the money. And I think in this particular case, when we're talking about a colossal amount of money that was supposed to go to the family of this woman, I don't even know where the 4.6 came from. Did he rip off an insurance company to get it in the first place?
I think so. Yeah. I think something happened where they got awarded, but he had a fake bank account set up so the money would go into this bank account purportedly for Gloria Satterfield's sons.
But what is inexplicable to me is how the sons didn't have a press conference saying, where's our money? Well, Alex said that we got this settlement for $4.6 million. Where is it? And you have to wonder one of the questions I would have as a reporter down there is, was there any sort of collusion in this money? They rip off an insurance company. We're going to duke you, $200,000 or $2 million. We're going to take $2 million. It does raise some questions about everyone in this town seems to have their finger in the pie and just willing to get a little bit muddy.
Well, if you see the way that the whole thing was structured based on that clip that Bill just showed, he got an attorney friend of his to represent the Miss Satterfield's family. And so the insurance company pays out, and then they use this bank account and they call it forged. I believe the reporter stated that a lot of times structured settlements go to must be a corporation that sets up and will distribute the funds called forged. So they were pretty cunning and tricky the way that they did it. I think that it sounds to me, we'll have to see what the investigation yields, but it sounds like both parties were part and parcel to that ripoff of that, I think it was $4.3 or $4.6 million. So I know the family didn't get it, and that's terrible. And I don't think, and I said this in last night's show, I don't think if none of these things happened with Alec, maybe this family would have never got a dime,
Well, he was also, as we said, if this was a series, if you were writing a TV series, he also was stealing money from the Murdaugh law firm.
From his own firm.
Yeah. And in fact, before his wife was murdered, she had filed for divorce and had hired a forensic accountant to go over their finances. So
she was following the money. She was smart.
Yeah, but besides his opioid addiction, us New Yorkers, we say, where's the Gumara? We haven't heard about that yet, Where is the Gumara?
She hasn't surfaced just yet, but I have a feeling there's going to be a surfacing of a Gumara.
Unless Stephen Smith was somewhat of a Gumara for the, you have to wonder what.
Right, we don't know about that. In fact, that's an allegation that hasn't been fully investigated yet. But his mother is saying about time someone's investigating this as a murder because it was definitely no hit and run vehicle accident.
There was no skid marks. There was nothing as a homicide investigator, Bill, was there anything to indicate that there was a hit and run accident at that?
No, they said it looked like blunt trauma. And, the whole theory about the mirror, he'd have to be 7.5 feet tall to get hit with a mirror from a truck. And if that happened, he wouldn't be in the center of the road. He'd be on the side of the road.
And there would be more injuries than that. He had one.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Right?
There was no debris from, if you strike a mirror, a human body strikes, the mirror strikes a human body, especially in the head, and inflicts that kind of an injury. There would have been some type of debris on the road. Like you said, no skid marks. And we saw the positioning of the body was almost like across the double yellow line in the middle of the road. So if he was walking along the road facing traffic, let's say, and he got hit with a mirror, he would have probably been hurled into the the side of the road as opposed to the middle of the road. Now he would have had, no matter how he got hit, if he was walking along the side of the road, he wouldn't have been in the middle. I don't think his body would have wound up in the middle of the road. But obviously, those are things that are all going to be looked at. And Bill, just one quick point about what you brought up. The wife goes to see an attorney to end her marriage. There's a forensic accountant is either hired or spoken to about doing follow the money investigation on this Alec. So again, that screams motive. I said that a couple of times in the past already. The motive is right there, and I'm sure that they're looking into all of those things. And there's going to be a lot of twists and turns coming in this case in the coming weeks and months, I'm sure.
You know, the other thing, Michelle, is when he stages that more like a self-inflicted gunshot wound, but he claims that he is on the side of the road changing a flat tire on tires that don't go flat, you know, and you know, the whole thing makes no sense. And then he gets in some car purportedly to take him to the hospital, but then he decides, you know something, I want a helicopter. So he calls a helicopter, and the helicopter shows up and picks him up and takes him to a hospital in Atlanta, Georgia. Not Atlanta, but in Georgia. Yeah. So South Carolina, he was trying to evade the investigation, so he has the helicopter fly him to. And you know, if you get flown to a hospital by helicopter, if it's not an emergency, your insurance isn't paying for that. So you're talking $10K to $15K for that little ride to the local hospital. You know,
isn't that nuts? It reminds me of Charles Stewart. Do you remember the Charles Stewart case in Boston, where he was the guy that went into a black neighborhood for a Le Mans class? He claimed that, like, this non-existent black hooded man, you know, he created these race riots in Boston because he blamed the shooting death of his wife and unborn son on this, you know, phantom black guy. And obviously the cops are, you know, doing the right thing and trying to find the perp. And it caused all this turmoil. But as soon as he got to Mass General, at the time, I was working as like a secretary going to college at Mass General. And it was a rumor immediately that he had a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Like where he got shot, he clearly shot himself in the side. And it would have been impossible for the bullet to have been fired, just like with Alec. It's like, it's nuts. Now we say he hired someone. Obviously, that guy shot himself. And he did it without thinking it through with this, you know, BS story about the flat tire, which is so dumb.
Well, that's why he wanted to get himself off the scene. He didn't want to meet with investigators and have to show them everything, the wound and all. He got himself out of there, and then he, like Billy said, somehow or another, he managed to get on a helicopter and get completely out of that area and go to another state to be medically treated. So there was collusion, as they say there.
Well,
I want to show you this.
Who just has a helicopter on standby? Because believe me, there's plenty of times I'd love to get out of LA real fast.
Yeah.
This is the person that Alec hired to shoot him, allegedly.
Oh my God.
I consider you one of my best friends. You're like a brother to me.
That so-called brother is Alec Murdaugh. South Carolina authorities say he asked Curtis Smith to shoot and kill him September 4th. The plan, according to SLED, to help Murdaugh's surviving son Buster collect a $10 million life insurance policy. But didn't. Instead, Murdaugh said what happened, so they arrested both of them. But where's the connection between the two? Through court records, we found out Murdaugh represented Smith in a personal injury lawsuit back in 2010.
Had to have 3 discs removed out the back and got rods and screws in every place of them. It's not fun.
Smith says injuries from a logging accident left him permanently disabled.
Talk to me about the pain.
Oh, it's an everyday thing. I mean, it's every day. I know it's there all day long.
Court documents indicate Smith took OxyContin for that pain, but fast forward to this month. Authorities charged Smith with distribution of meth and possession of marijuana, a drug parallel to what unfolded during Murdaugh's bond hearing.
If anyone wants to see the face of what opioid addiction does, you're looking at it.
In the days after the shooting, Murdaugh said he checked himself into rehab for substance abuse.
Is Alex somebody that you cared about?
Yeah, I say he's like a brother to me. I'd have done anything in the world for him, almost anyway. It's crushing to know that evidently I mean nothing to nobody, especially him.
Curtis says he feels betrayed.
I guess so. If I was gonna shoot someone in the head and missed, I mean, I have one question for you, Michelle. He hires this guy to shoot him for the $10 million life insurance policy that his son was the beneficiary to. Why wouldn't this also be the case with his son and his wife? Why wouldn't he do that?
That's exactly right. It's almost like he set himself up to look at that guy. He looks like he would shoot anybody. I mean, he's got a hairstyle,
and he looks like he could shoot
since 1982.
And it looks like he could shoot the ass out of a rat at 1,000 yards too, and he missed.
No, that's why. Just look at that guy. He's an obvious meth head, and you could see he's all messed up. But if you looked at the back of Alex's head when he was in that court appearance, they look like a red mark going downward this way, almost like he did it himself or had the guy do it. But it's very odd. I can't see how he hired the guy to kill him, and he doesn't kill him. He just grazes him. So like, oh, I missed. Let me, you sure? You shoot him again. No, but who knows? It's just sounds like a total bullshit story in plain English. And the other thing is, he says in that interview, I do anything for him. Almost, he says. Now, I think he's pulling himself out of the trick bag or trying to for that double homicide. He might be involved in that double homicide. I mean, who knows? Who knows? I'm sure that the investigators in the sled are looking heavily into that banana and Alec as well.
I mean, that wackadoodle, you have to wonder, like, who called it? First of all, where was the helicopter? Like, is it Uber helicopter?
No, it was like, he called it on the phone because it was from a company called Crash or something like that.
Yeah, but
Care, C-A-R-E.
Yeah, Care, but he took off in a car. Somebody was driving him away from the scene, and then he got into the helicopter.
Right, exactly.
A quick exit.
This doesn't make any sense. It's so crazy.
Yeah, I mean,
no, but when you're juiced up and the police are intimidated by you because of who you are, and there's two different agencies, there's Highway Patrol, there's all these different agencies, they're not going to ask the right questions. This family.
We see that going on right now in New York City a little bit.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You got people with some juice that are like trying to take down some cops, perhaps.
Are you referring to the FBI raiding the Sergeants Benevolent Association offices today?
I am indeed.
I
just, look, I think that as cops, we all know, and as somebody who has holds law enforcement in such high esteem, nobody wants to see anybody who's dirty, and you want people to be held accountable. But here's a question I have for you two. As I watch, countless state troopers in Massachusetts get hauled off for taking an early slide on a Friday. I mean, how many FBI agents ever go to prison?
None of them. And I know at least 3 of them that should. McCabe, Strzok, and Comey should have all went to prison.
Oh yeah,
I can add another 4. Yeah.
There's another prosecutor in there, Bill, that was on the Mueller case, Andrew Weissman, but that's a story for another day. I have 2 words with regard to what's going on with Sergeant Ed Mullins: political payback. He was outspoken about de Blasio, Cuomo, and a lot of different policies that have taken place over the last few years in New York City. This is political payback. I'm sure of it.
100%.
I think it might even be personal. It's personal. I mean, look, we don't want to go too inside baseball, but we all know that there was a photo of the mayor's daughter that was not flattering, that the SBA got blamed for leaking. And, this is the comeuppance.
I agree.
That sounds like motive to me.
Yep. Folks, if you're not subscribed to Police Off the Cuff, please go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, give us a thumbs up. This is Michele McPhee is our guest tonight. She's a great novelist, a writer. She's was a New York Daily News beat reporter in charge of all the reporters, and she has some amazing stories. I want to speak a little bit about, because I know you spent 6 years writing about the Boston Marathon bombing. And to me, that is one of the most interesting cases. And one of the things I always wondered about, being a New York City cop and knowing about the relationship between large police departments and the FBI, what was the relationship like between the Boston police and the FBI during that investigation?
Can we say frosty, unfriendly, not good at all? Not even just the BPD, it's the state police. It's even the ATF had beef with the FBI after the Boston Marathon attacks. And a lot of it was because of the secrecy that continues to be shrouded around this case. Half of the Tsarnaev case is still under seal, including the cost. We've spent so much money on this kid's trial and now his appeal as they try to save his life that the judge sealed it. So it's under seal how much money we spent on his penalty phase, on his guilt phase, and now on his ongoing appeal that's going all the way to the Supreme Court in a couple of weeks on October 13th. I mean, imagine that we spent so much money on this terrorist that they sealed it so that we can't become outraged by it. And, my book really, the FBI is at the center of it because, look, they had an open investigation into Tsarnaev that was sparked after warnings from the Russian FSB. Think about that in the current climate, right? The Russians warned us, hey, we got this guy, Tamil Tsarnaev. He's, in contact with some really dangerous jihadi over here in Russia, in the motherland. And we think he's going to come here and join the jihad. So the FBI had an open case against Tamil Tsarnaev in 2011. They interviewed him multiple times. And we're expected to believe that they have a photo of suspect Black Hat and they don't recognize him? That's ridiculous. You guys are detectives. I'm a reporter. If I interviewed you two today and you blew up the marathon in a year, I think I'd remember your face.
Yeah, so they knew that these guys, Tamerlan and Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, were bad guys, yet they didn't share that information with the police. And this was after 9/11, where the 9/11 Commission said this secret squirrel shit has to stop. And it has never stopped and probably never will stop, because every time the FBI is asked a question about that, they say, oh, it's top secret. Oh, really? It's top secret. But how come Comey gave documents to a Columbia University professor? Wasn't that top secret?
Sure was.
Yeah.
And why did McCabe lie to Congress? And think about this, the FBI, I have a podcast out now that you can find at mayhempod.com. And in it, there are lawmakers from both sides of the aisle. You have Michael McCall from Texas, Republican, just as pissed off as, Bill Keating from Massachusetts, just as pissed off as Hank Johnson. So everybody in Congress is pissed off. Why? Because the FBI doesn't show up. Can you imagine not showing up for court? So the FBI gets a subpoena from Congress, from the Homeland Security Committee, in the Senate and in the House, and they just simply do not show up. So it got so bad that a bipartisan delegation of lawmakers, federal lawmakers, had to go to Russia to get answers with Steven Seagal. Remember him from Hard to Kill? Talk about mullets. Like that guy that shot that dude in the head. Can you imagine that the FBI refused to cooperate with Congress? So they are forced to go to Russia, where the FSB is more helpful, with Steven Seagal from Hard to Kill.
It's just
unbelievable.
You can't make that stuff up. It's just amazing. And Billy, a lot of the time,
I just wanted to play this.
Only glimpse of Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, this prison security video. Until now, on the day he was to be sentenced to die, this apology. I am sorry for the lives that I have taken, for the suffering that I've caused you, for the damage that I've done. And from him, this stunning confession. If there's any lingering doubt, I did do it, along with my brother. And affirming his Muslim faith, he added, I prayed for Allah to bestow his mercy upon the deceased, those affected in the bombing and their families. I pray for your relief, for your healing. Tsarnaev spoke without ever looking at the survivors and victims in the courtroom, some of them there to give victim impact statements. The mother of Crystal Campbell, one of 3 people killed in the twin bombings, saying, I don't know what to say to you. What you did to my daughter was disgusting. Afterward, many said they just cannot accept Tsarnaev's words of remorse.
He did his thing. He blew people up. He got what he deserved.
Fukaril's son, Mark, was pierced by hundreds of bits of shrapnel. He is still suffering.
He said that he was remorseful. I find that hard to believe. It really does not change anything for me because what he took from me, I'm never going to be able to regain.
Tsarnaev's lawyers say he will appeal his conviction. That could take years, possibly even decades. He will spend that time most likely on federal death row in Indiana, Terre Haute, Indiana, where he will be confined 23 hours a day to a small Spartan cell. Robin and David.
You know what's really disgusting? What they didn't show in that very first clip when he was walking around his cell, that was the day that he was arraigned. And he swaggered into the courtroom like he was a rap star, and his sisters are in the front row crying, and he blew them a kiss. And later that afternoon, he went down into that cell, stood up on the bench, and flipped the bird into the cameras for everybody to see. So that unremorseful piece of garbage giggled throughout that trial, smirked at his victims. The former Boston Police Commissioner, Willie Gross, actually was so enraged by his behavior that when he climbed off the stand, he literally whispered to a maggot when he was climbing off the the kid was infuriating. And so this idea that he was remorseful or he was sorry is absolute nonsense, because when he was convicted, my sources tell me the lawyers went back, everybody was weeping and crying except for Dzhokhar. He could not care less. And by the way, he's at ADX Supermax suing us. This guy is getting stimulus checks in prison. He's at ADX Supermax getting stimulus checks from the federal government and using our money to sue us because the Bureau of Prisons won't let him wear the white hat that he is intentionally wearing around the prison to piss off the guards, because it's exactly like the hat he wore when he detonated the bomb behind a row of children at the Boston Marathon.
You know, Michelle, I just want to, there was some heroes in this too. And I just want to shout out
Many.
To the Watertown police, who was a small
Unbelievable guy.
little police department who banged it out with these two savages who were throwing bombs at them, who got into a gunfight like you've never seen before. And one of my friends played the sergeant, the real in the movie Patriot Days, my friend Cliff Moylan. And he got to say,
I know, Cliff.
yeah, he got to say in that movie, "Welcome to Watertown, motherfucker." And I was like, Cliff, that's the greatest line in the history of cinema that you got to say that. And I apologize, I forget the sergeant's name that he played. I've spoken to the guy on the phone.
John McClellan. And
That's it. That's it. John McClellan. I invited him on the show, and a few errors, and we couldn't hook it up. But that guy,
you have to get him on.
He's a superhero. A superhero.
He was at my house a couple of weeks ago. We had the big podcast launch. He was up on my rooftop in East Boston, hanging out with us. And you know what was really funny? You guys would appreciate this, but there were all these cops who showed up at the podcast launch. None of them had ever met each other, and they've all been lied to by the FBI. And it was cathartic because we had no intention of talking, but then I had to acknowledge them. And one by one, they all told their stories. And that synchronicity of cops who didn't know each other, who were being fed a line of bullshit for years, finally had a chance. I mean, I think for them it was cathartic. One guy even got teary-eyed because he's like, I've been made to feel like a nutbag for years. And in reality, it's just, we've been lied to and jerked around, and, the state secret classification. I mean, there's just so much.
It's disgraceful that they're even a law enforcement agency and they get to
Bill, I wanted to make a point about the FBI. Now you got a picture. The bombing goes down in Boston. The Boston Police Department's working on it. Then what happened in the coming days with the Watertown police and all of that, they were on the front lines dealing with all of this insanity, okay? Death, destruction, and then chasing these scumbags down and eventually getting the one brother was killed and then getting the other brother. So now the FBI, listen, there's a place for them in any investigation like this. It's a terrorism thing, but they're not going to come in and sweep in and say, all right, we're in charge now, and, kick out all these heroes to the curb. And I know the Boston police commissioner, I could tell from the press conferences, there's no way that he relinquished the case to them. He stayed right in the thick of it, and so be it, and they're famous for not sharing information because they're worried about corruption and different things like that. Meanwhile, they should look in their own backyard. Isn't that the pot calling the kettle black?
Absolutely.
And it's funny that you bring that up, Phil, because there was so much petty crap going on as people were processing the crime scene, like Boston police bomb squad cops were going through this horrible, grisly scene. There's, 17 amputees. The body parts are all over the road. There's blood and shrapnel and broken glass everywhere. A guy would plug in his phone to charge it, and the FBI would take it to make sure that they weren't taking pictures. You know, commanders were locked. They kept changing the code to the command center so that other cops couldn't get into it to use the bathroom. Petty nonsense. And Ed Davis, the commissioner you just referenced, he came on the podcast and he talked about on Tuesday, this is the first time ever that it's been acknowledged, but the FBI said forever they didn't have photos until they released them. Conveniently, right after Obama flew out of Boston on Thursday, the 18th, the very day that Sean Collier would be killed. This is the kind of arrogance that went on. They had a press conference, you know, there was that interfaith service. Obama had his show at all these world leaders in one place. Everyone's crying publicly. He leaves. They have a press conference. They release the photos that Ed Davis said on my show that they had on Tuesday. So for 2 full days, we could have been looking for these guys. Remember, Dzhokhar was a drug dealer at UMass Dartmouth. He was well known.
Right.
Tamerlan, they lived in a pretty busy city, Cambridge. They were active at the Y Crew, you know, MMA boxing gym. A lot of people knew these guys. They could have found them before. And this is what really motivated a lot of cops to help me in my investigation in my book, Mayhem, is Sean Collier would be alive today if they released those photos. And that's why cops are pissed off. And that's why I was motivated to write this book, because that cop was shot dead in cold blood 3 weeks from realizing his childhood dream of becoming a Somerville police officer. And the way he died was horrific.
Disgusting. It's disgusting.
It's disgusting. And they had the photos and they lied about it. And Commissioner Davis told the story how he's in a meeting with these big shots and the U.S. attorney. And he said, look, we gotta get these photos out. We got to get these to my cops. What if one of my cops gets hurt? And they said, no, you know, the someone in the DOJ doesn't want them released. And Ed Davis said, look, I want that person's name. And I have a couple of guesses who it is. I haven't been able to find out, but I think you might have mentioned him already tonight.
Yeah.
And he said, if somebody gets hurt, I'm going to say that this is the person who said not to release the photos. So right there should be, look at, and there were dozens and dozens of FBI agents who did an amazing job. They drove from all over the country. They slept in their cars. They worked their asses off, fine. But there's no accountability. That's what's so infuriating. It's very clear now, after years and years of investigating this, that Tamerlan Tsarnaev, the older brother, the dead one, was a moss crawler, which is a program that you guys are familiar with because it was started by Ray Kelly after 9/11. So that terrorist interdiction unit, it worked very well. What was the FBI's one goal after 9/11? Find Muslim informants. And Tamerlan Tsarnaev was the perfect recruit. He was promised citizenship, and when he didn't get it, he got mad and he blew us up.
He got even. And you want to know something? That's probably why the picture was held, because they didn't want egg on their face that they knew who he was. And, you know, when you go back to 9/11, there was surveillance on some of the hijackers, and that's I'm sure what it was. And it cost that poor young cop his life. It's
Joe Murray, thank you so much for the $4.99 super chat. Hi, Bill, Phil, and Michelle, and the wonderful police off the cuff community. Please be vigilant about our fundamental freedoms, privacy, and our beloved Constitution. You can't, we take it from you, Joe. Absolutely. Rita Schaefer, thank you for the $4.99 super chat. Love seeing so many of the same true crime lovers in the chat. Police off the cuff is the best. Thank you so much, Rita. I want to say something also. Another shout out was that the Watertown police, had they not basically won that gunfight and that bomb fight, the Tsarnaev brothers were on their way to Manhattan, to Times Square, with the bombs and all the other munitions they had to kill people. And these Watertown police are superheroes in my book. I think they did an amazing
100%.
job.
100%.
You know, and I just want people, because people don't know this whole story. They really don't.
Yeah.
You know, news media has the 24-hour news, and people don't read books like yours. Michelle, what's the name of your podcast? People are asking.
It's called Mayhem with Michele McPhee. But some cops say it should be Mayhem is Michele McPhee.
Michelle, I got a quick question for you related to what we were just talking about with the photo. Now, you as a reporter, a press conference goes up. They throw out the photo. What are you going to ask about that photo? Because this is what I think might have to do why they didn't hold it either. What would you ask about that photo? Would you ask where'd you get it from?
Well, here's a very interesting story about that. So that video of the two brothers walking down the street. Now, remember, they set up an entire cruise terminal to process all the evidence, and they had tegabytes of, cell phone video. The only video that was not seized by the FBI, but was actually recovered by the Boston police, a guy named Sergeant Mike McCarthy, who is a very well-respected. He runs the Brick now. He's essentially what you two were. He has a command of we don't call them precincts, but he has command of a division. He got a call from the owner of Whiskey's Bar and Grill on Boylston Street, who said, "Hey, I went through my security surveillance video, and I think there's something you guys might want to see." So the reason we have the images that we have of the brothers walking down the street is not because the FBI recovered it. It's because the BPD went and picked it up from the owner of the Bar of Whiskey's that's right there on Boylston Street. So even that was a BS story. And again, let's go back to the very basic premise. We are talking about a guy who had an open case with the FBI, who the FBI admits was interviewed several times, and he wasn't recognized by the agent assigned to the elite counterterrorism unit. So you're telling me there's two schools of thought. The counterterrorism agent is so ineffective that he didn't recognize somebody he had an open case on for months, who he interviewed multiple times, or, and I think it's the latter, you're right, this guy was on their payroll, and after Whitey Bulger and Mark Rossetti, and if you listen to the podcast, you have Chuck Grassley saying this directly to Mueller. Mueller didn't show up to answer questions at a marathon hearing, but he had to answer questions at a budget hearing. And remember, when did Mueller quit? Not long after the Boston Marathon bomb. When did Janet Napolitano quit, the head of the Department of Homeland Security at the time? Well, she flubbed her way through a congressional hearing. Humma. How did Tamerlan Tsarnaev get in and out of the country while he was on 2 terror watch lists? I mean, how did that happen, Janet Napolitano, Miss Secretary? She said, I have to answer that in a classified setting.
Yeah, right.
Refused to
I
answer
love
the question
that.
in public.
I love that.
Classified setting.
Yeah, classified.
She quit. And then, Richard Dolores, and, you mentioned Patriots Day, great movie, and Cliff Moylan, who I know. And
isn't it a small world, Michelle? You know where I met
is.
Cliff Moylan? I met Cliff Moylan 7 years ago taking a stand-up comedy class for 6 weeks. And that's how I met him. We stayed in touch. And in fact, he's the one that just hooked me up with Chaz Palminteri to get Chaz Palminteri on the show, because Chaz Palminteri is Cliff Moylan's acting coach. So it's such a small world, The Kanab, thank you for the...
You know how I met him?
How'd you meet him?
I lived at Mulberry and Grand. I was living at Mulberry Grand when we were doing City on a Hill, because, I was a writer on that show, City on a Hill. He walked into a diner on the corner, where the gun store, the old school gun store from Main Street is.
Javino's, yeah.
And across the street, there's that diner. So I was having breakfast, and he walked in wearing the Watertown Police shirt. And so I'm like, I would have known him if he was on Watertown, but I'm like, do you have a relative on Watertown Police? He goes, no. He goes, I played Sergeant John McClellan.
And Cliff is from Boston. Which is, it's amazing, right? I just want to shout out to someone else in the chat. The Kanab, thank you so much for the $25 super chat. And you say, thank you, Bill and Phil, loving the shows and the awesome Police Off the Cuff chat family. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you guys. There's a few more in the chat that life is short. I need to get Michelle's book. It's called Mayhem, right? Is that correct, Michelle?
Mayhem.
The one, Mayhem, yes. That's about the Boston Marathon bombing. Evelyn Albrecht, thank you for the $4.99 super chat. Ryan Investigative Group, Bill Ryan. What a knowledgeable and insightful guest. Michele McPhee is a tenacious investigator. I enjoy her books and her podcast. Michelle, we're going to have to... Angela Eng, thank you so much for the $4.99 super chat. I can't read your whole sign petition to Equisearch some loot. One of the things, Michelle, we're going to have you back on, because we can't possibly pick your brain enough in one episode to satisfy the the Police Off the Cuff fans. But I also want to get to we want to speak a little bit.
Guns?
No, we'd like to get to that some other time, but I want to talk
Gabby
about
Petito.
Gabby Petito, and
yeah.
there's been some new information out. I'm just going to put a short video up on the screen, and we're gonna talk about this for a second, and we'll get into this a little bit.
Few developments today.
Night in the investigation into the death of Gabby Petito and the search for her fiance, Brian Laundrie. We are now learning Brian flew home to Florida 5 days after the encounter with the couple that they had with the police in Moab, Utah. Laundrie's attorney says his client flew from Salt Lake City to Tampa on August 17th. He then flew back to Salt Lake on August 23rd. His attorney says Laundrie went home to get some items and close out a storage unit. Laundrie was last seen 3 weeks ago.
Also,
that was never confirmed. There was some information that he had flown home, but we don't report anything on police off the cuff unless it's either confirmed by an official source, either by the police or by his attorney or the family's attorney. So that's confirmed now that he actually flew home. And the date in question with the Moab police where that incident occurred, where many people, many Monday morning quarterbacks have said that the Moab police should have locked somebody up and that potentially could have prevented the homicide. We watched that interaction numerous times, and Phil and I both felt that the Moab police were very, very professional. And if anyone was getting arrested based on the information that we initially had, it would have been Gabby because she was the primary aggressor. However, later on, more information came in, 9/11 calls that we weren't initially privy to, that there was a witness that had seen him smack her. So that would have changed the whole thing for me as a boss responding to the scene. And what I probably would have done was arrested both of them. But would that have prevented the murder? Would that have prevented that? I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know.
Well, what would have prevented Ryan Laundrie from fleeing, though? And look, we all love law enforcement, but I do not know how that kid was not under surveillance. Like, if this was your case, wouldn't you have some patrol guys just watching him around the clock?
We discussed that too. 100%. That was a huge faux pas that they didn't have. At the time, though, they used that asinine phrase that they used to appease the media. He's a person of interest. He's not a suspect. He's a person of interest. No, to me, he was a damn suspect. The minute he drove her van back, used her credit card, and she's laying dead in a field. He was a suspect.
There's quite a few things. Go ahead, Michelle. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Phil. Honestly, I was
going to say there was quite a few things that were uncovered earlier today. Cassie Laundrie, which is Brian's sister, she was the one that was talking about, she had protesters on her in front of her home. She went out and she talked with them, and she was the one that divulged that he had traveled from the 17th. I guess he was in Wyoming, and he traveled back to Florida, and then on the 23rd he went back. Now they're saying that he went to empty out a storage facility or whatever. There was something going on there. I don't know exactly what transpired, but you have the incident on the 12th. Then you have him leaving her, and she allegedly stood in a hotel. I believe that she contacted her parents, and they sent her Uber Eats, and there was a couple of things. I guess they must have sent her money. She was in a hotel for that period of time, allegedly. Now, when he goes home, what does he tell his family? I had a fight with her, or we don't know exactly what went on. But I watched Dr. Phil earlier today. It was a great episode. Both Gabby's mother and stepfather, as well as the father and stepmother, they were all on with the attorney, and some really, if you're not emotionally attached to this case, watch the Dr. Phil episode from earlier today. There's going to be another one tomorrow. I was in tears on 2 or 3 separate occasions. If you didn't fall in love with Gabby Petito from seeing her on the news previously, you will definitely fall in love with her now. It's just, and when you see the emotion from the parents, I don't know how they could sit through that, but there were some pretty interesting things learned. For instance, the stepfather was in the area where she was found. The FBI contacted him. The hotel that he was staying at, they were actually cooperating with him. They provided a conference room, and he was able to contact everyone involved, I guess his wife, and then Gabby's dad and stepmother who were in New York. And they were able to identify Gabby through a specific article of clothing. That's how they were able to so quickly say it was her. And the lawyer interjected and said, they didn't say what it was. I believe the stepfather said it was a sweatshirt or a shirt, but the lawyer said it was a specific article of clothing that was local. I think what he meant by that, either it was local to where she was from in New York, maybe, or local to Florida. I'm not exactly sure, but that's how they were able to identify her right away. That was a good piece of information. And then to hear, and I'm going to refrain from referring to the Laundries in a negative way, because I said that as much as I want to, I'm going to refrain from it because I don't think it's professional. However, they talked about the contact that they did with that family. I'm talking about Gary's parents and step-parents. They were all intermediately calling, texting, and they were getting nothing back. That is atrocious. It's disgusting. It nauseates me. How did they not at least say, look, Brian's back in Florida with the van? They didn't know. The mother revealed this today on the show. They did not know that he was back in Florida until the 11th when they reported her missing in New York, and the cops went there and the police told them the van is back and he's there too. They thought at the time that both of them were missing. So, and then one other thing I want to get, I know I'm going on a little bit, but there was one other point, and Gabby's father made this point, and it was so earth-shattering. He said, what has this family done to find their son? They did one thing. They reported him missing to the police. We've grabbed every camera that we can get in front of. We traveled, all of us together, traveled all over the place to try and find our daughter. They did nothing. And that speaks volumes. And if you watch the episode, Dr. Phil said some pretty smart things to the family of Brian Laundrie, that they're not helping him. They're making themselves look bad. They're putting themselves at risk. They're putting him at risk. And he used his experience as being, he worked with lawyers on trials with juries when they would address juries that have mock trials. And he said, there's no possible way you can portray yourself any worse to a jury than what you're doing right now. And he actually addressed the family. He addressed Brian. It was a great episode. And I think that hopefully they'll come to their senses. And look, I know it's their kid. I get it. Believe me. You want to protect your children at all costs. But this is way beyond that now. This is way beyond this. Not going away. He's wherever he is, and it's clear he's on the run. So they gotta put their heads together, and they got to just, cooperate and have him turn himself in.
Yeah, it's, the other thing is, and I find this a little bit tough, and I understand why law enforcement would not release it, but they still have not released the cause of death. They released the fact that this is a homicide, which simply means death caused by another, but they have never released the cause of death. And that's very important. And they may be holding that close to the vest because they can't question him when he's brought in anyway. He has counsel, so they cannot question him. So they may just be using that so that they can present their case in the best way. But at some point, I think they sort of have to release that.
That is pretty unusual. Wouldn't you say, Michelle, the fact that they haven't released the body, they haven't come up with an actual cause of death? That seems odd to me. I mean, Bill, I'm sure agrees as well. What do you think, Michelle?
I mean, listen, the longest I ever had to wait for some sort of, you get the manner of death too. It's homicide. And you had a great episode with the former Emmy in New York City. The longest I ever waited was 5 days. They have to give it up. And this is where reporters are important. I would be hounding the medical examiner's office and the police department, putting in a FOIA request every day because they're entitled to that information. That's public information.
But Michelle, it's not a police department. It's the FBI again.
Well, there you go. Well,
but you would think that, this murder occurred in Wyoming. So you would think the Moab police would circumvent the FBI and say, no, this is our case because we're the local jurisdiction. I know.
Remember how many other women were murdered in Wyoming that you don't hear anything about that the FBI is supposed to be tracking down too.
It's funny
you have
brought
all
that up.
those Native American women that are missing and found dead or just never found at all. And the FBI is in charge of that case too.
It's funny you brought that up, Michelle, because I left that out from the episode that I watched earlier today on Dr. Phil. They were talking about, the attorney was mentioning that there were 2 or 3 other people, I think a total of 4 missing women in that area, but there were 2 or 3 that actually kind of fit. One for sure was very close to Gabby, but they used the article of clothing to identify her. And I think that was pretty telling. So again, the FBI holding back, and I just not releasing the cause of death, I think is one thing, but they're not releasing the body. That's very odd to me. And I know it was probably decomposed and stuff like that, and they want to do further examination, I guess, but it's a couple of weeks now. I think it's just kind of odd, that
Phil, the homicide, or they discovered the body on the 27th of August, so it's been a long time. It's been a very long time. Rita Schaefer, thank you so much for joining the YouTube, the Police Off the Cuff family on YouTube. Phil, I just want you to do a quick read of our favorite attorney's commercial here.
Joe Murray, attorney at law. Glad to have you back, Joe. He's in the chat tonight, feeling better, recovering from COVID. Have you found yourself in a jam? Are you in need of legal counsel in the New York area? Do you need a victim's advocate? Well, Joe Murray is your man. He's not only an experienced trial attorney, he's also a retired 15-year member of the NYPD. He knows both sides of defense. His website is jmurray-law.com. That's jmurray-law.com. His telephone number is 646-838-1702. That's 646-838-1702. Or you could email Joe at jmurray-law.com. That's joe@jmurray-law.com.
Joe, I could see Michelle writing this information down, so you probably got a new client.
Yeah, definitely. Joe, can't wait.
He's great. He's great.
Joe is great, but when we have him on the show, he always plays devil's advocate. He always takes the other side. And Joe's a retired NYPD police officer also, and he has a great story about how he became a lawyer. But we need a whole show.
That's
right. We need a whole show to go into that, so we're not going to go into that right now. But I also have a short video on. Let me put this on the screen. On the Brian's sister.
From those social media comment sections, if you use #HeyJB, #HeyMassa, or #HeyWalt here, we're going to play back some portions of the video here, some portions of the confrontation that occurred here yesterday at Lakewood Ranch here in Florida between protesters and, of course, Cassie Laundrie and her husband here. But let's first get some new details here from Josh Benson, who has been talking to attorney Stephen Bertolino here on Twitter. This is a screenshot here from Josh's phone. Josh, who you'll see tonight, everybody, on our newscast here on WFLA News Channel 8. And I will read this here as follows. Josh asking this question here. You can see there the timestamp today at 12:43 Eastern time, saying, can you please send me the explainer about the flight Brian took? Thanks. And then from Stephen Bertolino, Brian flew home to Tampa from SLC, Salt Lake City, on August 17th and returned to Salt Lake City on August 23rd to rejoin Gabby. To my knowledge, Brian and Gabby paid for the flights as they were sharing expenses. Brian flew home to obtain some items and empty and close the storage unit to save money as they contemplated extending the road trip. Again, this is from Josh Benson on Twitter. Josh, who's been in contact with attorney Stephen Bertolino, who of course represents Brian Laundrie here. Let's just start here with your initial reaction, Massa and Walt here. Massa, starting here with you. This is now new. The timeline here is getting filled in by the day.
The timeline is indeed getting filled in by the day. The first I heard that Brian had returned from the trip, left Gabby, was during that video where Cassie Laundrie and her husband were confronted outside of their home with their children inside the home. They were confronted by protesters, and in that I did a rough log of that roughly 20-minute excerpts that were released by protesters to News Nation. And the protesters asked, Brian flew back on the 17th, the dad paid for the ticket. And the sister said that she saw him on the trip. She confirmed that Brian flew back on the 17th, as the lawyer has now also confirmed as well. And she said that there was no sign of trouble. In fact, Cassie Laundrie said that during Brian's short trip home from Salt Lake City, that she FaceTimed with Gabby, and Brian was acting normal, just talking about where they had been and where they were going.
That's information that law enforcement and the FBI surely had way before the media had.
And why wouldn't you release that? So there's somebody who was on his flight that might have noticed something. Somebody who, saw her alone or didn't see her alone. Like this holding information and not sharing it with law enforcement and not sharing it with the public, I don't see how it's beneficial in any way whatsoever.
Well, did you see in the text message that the lawyer sent, he definitely covered his client there when he says, well, they were sharing expenses that they paid for the trip. It was probably her card. I'm venturing to say that it was her credit card that paid for that flight. And, what happened in that period of time? I'd like to have an answer to that. And then, going back to what I was saying earlier, the 11th is when they finally realized that he was back. So there was from the first that he was back in Florida to the 11th, they had an 11-day running start to cover things up, plan for his escape. And, maybe things were going on in that period, that 5-day period from the 17th to the 23rd. He could have been doing things to facilitate an escape. It could have been planned all along. So God only knows what happened in that time, in that period of time.
Joe Murray is keeping true, but Joe, thank you for the 1999 super chat, but he's being the antagonist again. He says, I disagree, brother. Brian Laundrie is the most hated and most hunted, accused, unauthorized access device perpetrator in the world. In my opinion, presenting that bogus charge is an abuse of power and against the rules of ethics. Well, Joe, I'd have to disagree with you because in the detective squad, we used to do that. We would do that all the time to put a homicide perp on ice, keep him where we knew where he was, and build our case. And that's surely, I think, what the FBI was trying to do with this. Use this in an effort to have something to arrest him on, put him inside, and build their case as he's cooling his heels in
Bill,
jail.
I got.
So hold on. Sorry, Phil.
No, go ahead.
I just have a question now. If the FBI was in charge of this from the time that she went missing, then it's really on them to keep him under surveillance in the first place.
I don't think they were in on it right from the beginning. I think they were enlisted when things started to blow up. I don't know for fact, but it sounds. I was told that, and this really has to be confirmed, that they tried to report her, that the stepfather who lives in, the father who lives in Florida. I'm getting a little confused here. Gabby's father lives in Florida. He tried to report her in the Northport Police Department as missing when they found out that she was not at the house, and they were told you have to report her missing in New York. And then a detective in the Nassau County Police Department, I believe it was, took the report, notified them, and that's when they went to the house. So there was some things going on that really haven't been brought to the surface. And I think
Phil, let me just mention something about police procedure. Missing persons reports are taken, recorded in the residence of the missing person.
Right.
Now, she had been living with Brian Laundrie's family for 2 years in Florida. So therefore that report should have been taken there.
100%.
She didn't live in Blue Point anymore. So from what I understood, a detective out in Blue Point somehow got the detectives in Florida to take this report. So you know how police departments can make it difficult for people to make a missing person report, especially if someone's over 18. Oh, they're allowed. Minus foul play. They're allowed to go wherever they want. We're not taking this report. And then they'll give you the old thing. Oh, how long have they been missing for? Immaterial. That doesn't mean anything. That's how cops will jerk you off too, is to say, oh, she hasn't been missing long enough. That's not true.
24-hour thing. That's total bullshit.
There is no time.
That is bullshit.
Right. But that's how they jerk you around.
Yeah.
And I'm sure her family got jerked around with who was going to take that missing person report. And it should have been the Florida police all along.
I got a comment about what Joe Murray said. I love Joe. He's a great friend. He's a terrific attorney. I really love the guy, but I got to disagree with him about it. What he said, the last comment about the charge being a BS charge. I had a guy wanted of a homicide, a 79-year-old woman brutally murdered We had location of him is in Atlantic City. It happened in Coney Island. We knew where he was. We went out to Atlantic City and we held him on a bullshit warrant. He had a trespassing summons that he didn't answer. We held him on it. We went back to New York, got an arrest warrant, went back 3 weeks later and extradited him. We knew where he was. We had him in custody. He wasn't going anywhere. And it's just a tactic to, get a hold of the guy. I think by them doing that, the feds, it put it out, through the federal system. He's wanted on a federal warrant. There's no question any law enforcement officer anywhere in the world can put their hands on Brian. He could be held. So I think it's a great tactic. I got to disagree with Joe. I love him, but I think he's wrong about this one.
Duty Ron, thanks for the $10 super chat. And Duty Ron gave Joe Murray a little rib. Great guest and awesome coverage. Police off the cuff, real crime stories. Joe Murray, you're fired.
He sounds like Donald Trump. You're fired.
Well, something, any content creator on YouTube that has 1.7 million views on a single episode, I think he can say whatever he wants in someone's chat, Yeah.
And listen, it's a difference. It's a difference of opinion, and he's on the defense attorney side, and I get it. But
Joe Murray's not letting go. He says, "That's right, Michelle. The great and powerful and unaccountable FBI has egg on its face for Brian Laundrie's disappearance during a camping trip." Sad.
We're all in agreement on that. There's no question
sad.
about that.
Key word is unaccountable. There's no accountability for them ever. And that's what I think people get really mad about.
Michelle, you're right, because if you would have did something like that in a local police department or the NYPD, you'd be walking a footpost in Staten Island by Tony and Tina's pizza shop. You know what I mean?
If you get an extra scoop of ice cream on your cone as a cop in NYPD, you got 30 days in the street, and they don't have any accountability.
It was just the perception that from someone that was standing online that you got extra ice cream because you were a cop. It was,
we had some of that. Think about this, right? Speaking of cops and what would happen in a report, Tamlin Tsarnaev is the prime suspect in an unsolved triple murder in Waltham, Massachusetts that happened on the 10-year anniversary of 9/11. And one of my sources called me and said, McPhee, it looks like an Al-Qaeda training video in here because they nearly decapitated these 3 MMA fighters. They sprinkled the body with drugs. There was money left behind. So it looked like it was the 10-year anniversary of 9/11. Well, we now know that Tamlin Tsarnaev committed that murder with another Chechen kid who fled town that very night for Florida. And they're interviewing him in May, a few weeks after the Boston Marathon attack. The FBI and a couple of cops, one cop left the room during this interview. We don't know why. Another cop was tying his shoe, so he didn't see anything. But during this, the FBI agent shoots this guy multiple times, Ibrahim Todashev. Now, in the initial report, it said that the perp, Todashev, charged at the FBI agent with a pole. The next report said it was a broomstick. And now, if you read the court filings in the Supreme Court, this is the highest court in the country, it's now suddenly a samurai sword. Can you, as detectives, imagine a scenario where the weapon that prompted you to shoot a suspect dead has changed 3 separate times in official documents? What would happen to you guys?
The FBI would come into the case and charge us with perjury.
I was just going to say, it's called perjury. It's called perjury. Oh, my God.
Well, Michelle, the case of the 3-4 anti-crime, right? The Local Motion and Michael O'Keefe. And one of them actually went to prison, a federal prison for a year for lying to the FBI. They got him in a perjury trap. And they tried to do the same thing to Michael O'Keefe, who was in the shooting with Kiko Garcia and the whole thing. And he was told not to go to court in uniform, to wear a suit, and don't you dare plead the fifth. His lawyer said, wear your uniform and plead the fifth every single question. And he did. And he walked out of that courtroom because they were looking to put him in a perjury trap too. It's disgusting.
Yeah, there was a Boston cop named Harry Byrne I wrote about years ago, more than a decade ago, who some Harvard kid with connections, a juiced up kid, spit in this cop's face. So needless to say, the cop got heated and smacked him. Now, I'm not saying the guy shouldn't lose his job. This is a bad thing. You can't smack kids around. But he went to prison. because the FBI put him in a perjury trap about lying about whether or not he smacked this kid in the face. The kid who had it coming, by the way.
Right.
But would surprise you to hear that the kid in that case, his dad worked in the Department of Justice.
No, it doesn't
So
surprise
Harry
me at
Byrne
all.
went to solitary confinement for like 5 years for slapping a kid in the face.
That's disgusting. That's really disgusting.
Joe Murray keeps giving me money, so I'm going to keep reading what he says. Thanks for the $4.99 super chat. But what are they going to do when they get him? Besides giving him discovery and access to their files, very foolish and sloppy. Joe, you're unrelenting. You're the boxer who's going to the body, and you ain't going to quit till the guy lowers his hands and you hit him with that left hook and knock him out.
That's
I
Joe
like
Murray.
it. I like it, Joe.
You know what though? I know what he's getting at, but listen, nobody cares about the unauthorized use of the electronic device. That's not a charge that's going to go anywhere. It's all about putting their hands on him and building the murder case. And I know that Joe, he's a constitutionalist and he's got issues with overreach of the government as well as I do. Believe me, I really do. And I'm sure Bill does. And I'm sure you do too, Michelle. But in this particular case, I think it's a very smart tactic having an arrest warrant out there for whatever they could. I don't care if it's, jaywalking. It's something they can put their hands on him for and hold him. And then we'll work on the murder case. That's the way I feel about it.
But Phil, here's the issue. I think it's doubtful that kid is in the country. He had so much time to get the hell out of here.
Listen,
he had time.
Anything's possible, but there was 911 calls over the last few days about the Appalachian Trail, and Bill and I were skeptical about it. The 911 caller sounded authentic. He did meet somebody. He describes detail. He believes it to be that it was Brian, but earlier today I'm going to reference the show again on Dr. Phil. The family of Gabby said that he was very familiar with the Appalachian Trail and that both Gabby and Brian would go there for 2 or 3 days at a time and camp out in different areas of the Appalachian Trail. So I don't think he's out of the country. I could be wrong. Anything's possible. He could be on Mars by now with all the head start he got on law enforcement. But I think I think that probably might be a good lead. I mean, we'll have to wait and see what shakes out about it, but somewhere close to the east part of the country, I think, is where he's going to wind up being captured.
Michelle, I agree with you. I think he's out of the country because 911 calls don't mean shit. When I was responding to the World Trade Center, every other minute there was a bomb threat. Really? People calling in bomb threats after the buildings came down? So the 911 calls mean nothing. And I think that, this guy Dog, he's just inventing shit so that he can, there should be a guy from Harlem called Cat, and he should go search his dog and his cat. And Cat, I bet you Cat's gonna find Brian Laundrie, because he's much better than Dog because he's from Harlem,
Yeah.
And he can dress up like. Go ahead, Michelle.
I want to know who these parents are because I'm with you. Like, it's really disgusting that you had somebody living under your roof. And how do you not have some sort of empathy for her parents? Like, that's the part of the story that bothers me the most. Are those, I'll say it, dirtbag parents that seemingly don't, how could you not have compassion? Especially after she was found dead. How do you not call them and say, you know what, we screwed up. We should have been more cooperative. But nothing is worse. Look, we all come from, I lived in Brooklyn a long time. I'm from Boston. This is when the old school justice, you kind of miss those days, right? Where someone would just show up at their door with a baseball bat and say, tell me everything you know.
Yeah.
Don't you feel like you just want to send someone there with a bat?
Yeah, it's street justice.
The Brooklyn's coming out now, Bill. The Brooklyn,
yeah.
Oh, I like that.
You see what's at my door. My home depends.
Good girl.
That's right. Mamachi, thank you for the $5 super chat. That family sat around the campfire while Gabby was deceased in the desert. They can never fix this. You're 100% right. That's so true. Joe Murray. Joe Murray's not done. Joe, thank you for the thank you for the 1999 super chat. Man, you better be making $5.50 an hour to throw me all this money. The government charged him with the wrong subsection on the warrant. They filed a motion to seal the indictment. It was granted. Then the very next day, the government moved to unseal the indictment. They are boobs. Shame. Wow.
Is that true?
That's what Joe Murray, counselor at law,
They very well may be boobs. They very well may be boobs.
They are boobs. First of all, how do you seal the indictment? The guy is under indictment. I don't get the sealing. The FBI and their powers to classify everything. I don't get how there's no checks and balances. You guys can't say, "Hey, we want to seal this arrest warrant." You can call me at the Daily News, and if we have a good relationship, which is what reporters do not do anymore, is build relationships. You can say, "McPhee, can you hold off on this? Don't write about this guy because we're going to scoop him up in a couple of days. Sit on it. Can you sit on it for 2 days?" I would do that.
Billy, you got to let me read this one, please.
Go ahead, Phil. Go ahead, Phil. You read this one.
Rudy Ron, thank you for the $5 super chat. Joe Murray is all jacked up on Mountain Dew. LOL. I love you, Joe. That is great. Listen to me. He's got to be foaming at the mouth right about now. He's fired up. But that's good. That shows he's a true good defense attorney. He's arguing his point. I love him. I love him.
Oh my God, Joe, you're doing more. Joe Murray again, $4.99. Thank you. I'm sure that they do have compassion and that they love Gabby very much. But as an attorney, I would say the same thing. No talking to anyone.
Yeah, that's okay.
No,
listen.
It's not at the beginning. Not before her body was found.
No.
They knew.
I'm referencing if he's taken into custody, telling him not to say anything. I get it. But when she's a missing person, that family had a necessary obligation to tell that family she was living under their roof. They should have definitely said, "Look, he's back. We don't know where she is." Something. They should have did something, and they made themselves look worse. And I just think that they're probably as bad narcissistic, self-absorbing people as he is, because he's obviously an abuser and a self-absorbing narcissist, and he might have learned it from his parents. Who knows?
Phil, I have to read this. Lioness 59. Wow, what's up with Joe tonight? I can't even pronounce this. Litigationalius hyperactus.
Litigationalius hyperactus.
I almost can't pronounce that. Here's another retired police, Charles Pizzo. Thanks for the $5 super chat. Dogs a wannabe cop who need attention in the spotlight, not about the Vicks or the family. It's all about me day. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I don't think Dog is finding anything that belongs to Brian Laundrie. I think he's finding stuff and saying, "Hey, look at this."
The only thing he's doing, he's shining a light and he's putting more people to see the face of Brian Laundrie, see the face of Gabby Petito. And, you never know. I don't have a problem with him being involved in it. You're right. He's not a real cop or anything like that. But he has a lot of people. He has a huge audience, and, people you never know. Somebody that's watching him might spot Brian or something like that, or may have seen something that might be important to the case. So as many eyes on this as possible, I think would lead to a possible good conclusion. But he is.
Someone's saying that Joe should lay off the Mountain Dew.
Rudy Ron, I love that line. He was getting jacked up on Mountain Dew. That was
Go ahead, Michelle. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, that was one of the best movies of all time. Talladega Nights. I can't get it out of my head. It'll be like an earworm. You're all jacked up on Mountain Dew.
Oh my God. We're at like an hour and 17 minutes, and I usually don't like to go this long, but it's been so interesting. And folks, if you're not subscribed to Police Off the Cuff, please hit our YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button, ring that bell, give us a thumbs up. Tell us in the chat how much you love us. Tell us that you love Phil straight out of Brooklyn. You love that Brooklyn accent. You love my Long Island accent. And you love Michele McPhee's Boston accent. By way of Hollywood, she's going to make it big on the left coast if she can stand it over there, But
if I can last that long,
if you can last that long on the left coast, but something. Look,
she's got her baseball bat, Joe. Don't forget, nobody better play with her.
That's we have a lot of.
It is interesting how easy it is to get people to back down here. They're not used to people like us, so we usually win every argument. I'm like, wrong girl. That's all you need to say. And you're
that Boston accent is intimidating. I know Whitey Bulger. Whitey Bulger's my uncle.
Speaking of the FBI.
Right.
Folks, we love to laugh on this show too. Besides covering serious topics, there's got to be humor because it can be a long show and there's a lot of funny stuff. And law enforcement, some of the funniest people I ever met in my life were cops. And Phil, I'm sure you'll agree with that. And Michelle, you'll probably agree with that too.
Definitely.
Duty Ron says, I hope everyone knows that. Thanks for the $5 super chat. Duty Ron says, I hope that everyone knows that Dog is a convicted murderer. I didn't know that.
I didn't know that. And it seems
I-
like his audience would be in the Appalachians. So if you're going to watch Dog the Bounty Hunter, I'm pretty sure you live in the Appalachians.
You know, Michelle, I'm definitely going to look for a guy named Cat from Harlem and try to start a police, try to start a bounty hunter show with a dude named Cat. That would be so great.
The problem in LA is
If him and Dog were competing against each other, Dog and Cat are looking for the same guy.
Right now, there's some producer taking notes in LA saying, that's a great idea.
That's a great idea for a show. Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's
That's pretty interesting, though, that he's a convicted murderer. I didn't know that either. I mean, he looked
I
like a
didn't know
sketchy guy, but I figure if he's got a bounty hunter's license, he can't be, I guess they can give it to a convicted murderer. I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, it sounds
Looks like the dude. He really does look like the guy that shot Alec Murdaugh in the head, though. They kind of look alike.
He looks a little bit like him. Yeah, he does. You know, someone else said that if you find Cat, can he be a guest on the show? Absolutely. If I find a proper cat that's like cool and he dresses cool and he's big.
Cool Cat.
Cool Cat. I'll have him on the show in a minute.
Cool Cat the Bounty Hunter coming
That's
to
right.
a podcast near you.
In fact, we hired him to compete with Dog. Look at this guy from Harlem. His name's Cat. I would love that.
That's
That'd be
awesome.
great.
Yeah.
So, Michelle, you know, I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show. And you have to promise us to come back on because we just basically scratched the surface. We didn't even get that far. So would you come back on another time?
Are you kidding me? This is a blast. I would do this every night.
All right, great.
These
Well,
are the
now,
stories I love talking about.
what's the name of your podcast again? Because I put it up, but it's out of the chat, just got it through. What's the name of it?
It's called Mayhem with Michele McPhee. You can get it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, but you can go to mayhempod.com and all of the platforms are there. MAYHEM pod, that word pod.com.
Mayhempodcast.com. And, you know,
And
I
I'm
just,
sending you guys books to give away to your audience next time.
oh, that would be
Thank
fantastic.
you very much.
I want that Boston Marathon book. That's the one I really want to read because that really interests me. And I took a special interest in the Watertown police when I saw what those guys did. And what, you know, something we talk about PTSD. Do you think those guys might have it? I'd say they 100% have it. Having bombs thrown at them,
100%.
you know, and they should be
Don't
taken
forget,
care
like,
of.
when they should be. Remember, these sergeants, they got into a bomb and bullet battle. There's bombs being tossed. I mean, a pressure cooker bomb, pipe bombs. And in the end, it was Dzhokhar that ran over his brother and dragged him to his death. So a sergeant named Jeffrey Puglisi shot Tamerlan 9 times. Tamerlan, who was clearly well trained because he came right at him like he was in the military down the street with guns blazing. He got so frustrated when he ran out of bullets, he threw the gun at Sergeant Puglisi, who had him on the ground, was wrestling with him. Sergeant McClellan, who you referenced, Joe Reynolds, all these guys are on top of him. He's so strong that, you know, they can't even get the cuffs on him because he kept fighting them. And then Dzhokhar, his little brother, jumps behind the wheel of that stolen SUV, guns it to try to get the cops. And instead, he drags his brother, you know, about 60 feet to his death. He gets scalped and he's still alive.
You know,
The dude has
poetic
been
justice
tried 9 times.
poetic justice
Isn't
that
that
he
great?
killed his own brother. Yeah, that's great. Duty Ron, in 1976, thank you for the $10 super chat. Chapman was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 5 years in a Texas prison. He had been waiting in a getaway car while his friend shot and killed Jerry Oliver, 69.
Wow.
So there it is. There it is. You know.
How do you
and,
get a license to carry as a convicted murderer? Is that
no, he
okay?
doesn't. They carry those big mace canisters. It's
Yeah,
like
he
so
doesn't. He
pathetic.
doesn't carry
really?
a firearm. He doesn't carry a firearm. How does he get the license to be a bounty hunter? That's the other question. And first-degree murder, 5 years. That whole thing doesn't sound. I believe Duty Ron, obviously, but sounds real sketchy to me.
You know, the last super chat from Joe Murray, because I know he's breaking open his piggy bank and he's seeing if he has enough money.
He's on his second 2 liter.
He broke open his second piggy bank during this show. He wrote, freedom. Let's see all the American flags in the chat. If you love the Constitution and the USA. USA. That's Joe Murray. Joe, we love you. And we're so happy that you've 99% or 95% cured of COVID because we missed having you in the chat. You know, T. Michelle Smith, a new member of the Police Off the Cuff family. Thank you so much for joining the family. Joe Murray keeps saying US, US, US. Wow. The chat was
going up too in the chat.
a lot of flags coming up. Dawn Marie, good to see you here. Princess Mitch, good to see you here. Maui Swift, I love that name. Joe Murray, you're all over this chat. I don't know how you're so quick at typing. I guess he's typing up his own paperwork as a lawyer.
You drink 2 liters of Mountain Dew, you'll be typing quick too.
That's what it is. He's super fast. He's definitely super fast. Lieutenant Peter Pranzo, Harlem Raiders, great to see you. And Richella, I'm sure Richella's in the chat somewhere. But Joe Murray's jacked up, and he lost 25 pounds. He was a 300-pounder for a while. I wouldn't want to get hit with that left hook of a 300-pound left hook. He got
a habit of knocking out detectives too, so I'll stay away from him.
You're right. You got to stay away from Joe Murray. So, guys, we're at an hour 25, folks.
Yeah, we're over.
On behalf of Police Off the Cuff, my partner, co-host Phil Grimaldi, and Michele McPhee. Thank you guys so much for listening tonight. We had a ball. We had a lot of fun. It went so. I told you, Michele, the hour will fly by, and sure enough, it's an hour and 25 minutes. So I'm sorry I kept you this long, but not really.
Oh, are you kidding? I had a blast.
All right.
It was so great to meet you, Michele. Thank you for coming
Great
on, and
to meet you
please
too.
come on again. And we have to meet up sometime when you're in the area, when you're in New York.
Are you kidding me? I
Absolutely.
can't wait to go to Spumoni Gardens now.
I can't wait to go to Spumoni Gardens either. I just hear so much about Spumoni Gardens. I got to go there. Anyway,
I like the way she says it. Spumoni Gardens.
Gardens.
I love it.
Spumoni Gardens.
Good night, everyone. Thank you so
Good
much
night.
for listening.
Thank you.
Stay safe.